Hey guys, it's Amanda. So today I wanted to share some tips with you guys for getting a reluctant reader to love reading. Not just to read because you're telling them to read, but to really, really love reading. So if you're new here, I'm Amanda. I am the owner of the forthcoming school, Lucas Literacy Lab. It's a middle school, and a big focus of my school is literacy. Something that I've heard a lot from a lot of parents is that they cannot get their child to be interested in reading. It's hard with video games, with TV, with social media, especially in the middle grades. There's so much, there are so many other things that are taking their attention away from reading, but reading is so valuable and so fun and so exciting and so beneficial in so many ways. So I'm going to give you a couple of books that I think you can start with any child. But before that, I'm going to give you a few tips. With my daughters, I have two daughters. One is 16 and one is 7. My 16-year-old has always been very bookish. She loved reading, always. There was never any real pushback from her when it came to reading. My youngest fought me like tooth and nail all the time. I would get her books for Christmas or books for her birthday, and she would be like, I don't want this. She would straight up say, I don't want this. I want toys. And she would like chuck it to the side. That did not stop me. I kept on getting her books. I kept reading to her. I read to her every night. I would put audiobooks on. We would have reading hour. And the key was to pay attention to her, find out what she was interested in, what she was going to like, and then try again. So if you're trying to get a child into reading, I would say step 1 is to read to them. It doesn't matter how old they are. I think everyone should be read to, including adults, which is why there is Audible or other audiobooks. They're never too old for it. Sit on the couch, get a cozy blanket, get a cup of tea, get some coffee, get some hot cocoa, and read to them. That is going to, first, it's going to bond them to you using books. So literature is going to be remembered as something that bonds them and makes them feel loved. Bonds them to you and makes them feel loved. So if you are using books as a way to cuddle with them and show them that they're seen and they're loved and they're cared for and they're safe, they're going to like reading. They're going to want that time. Even if they fight you on it in the beginning, depending on their age, they might. It does not matter. You persist. You keep reading to them. If you're busy and you can't read to them, listen to audiobooks together. Put them on in the car, bake a cake together and have the audiobook playing, talk about the book, just read to them, enjoy stories together the same way that you would have a movie night. But do it daily, do it before bed. A lot of the times in my house, we can't get to the books until right before bedtime. On an ideal day, we'll read more than that, but sometimes it's just really busy and we can't. So we'll wait until bedtime and we'll have I'll read a chapter of something before bedtime. The kids always read on their own. That's non-negotiable, but for me to read to them, sometimes it just has to be before bed. And that's okay, as long as you're reading to them, as long as it's a daily practice, that you are finding a way to enjoy books together. Tip number 2 that I would give you is what I touched on before, is to make sure that you're choosing books that your kids are interested in. A very easy way to do this is to find books that are funny. It doesn't have to necessarily be a topic that they're interested in, but if it's something that will make them laugh, they're gonna like it. If it's an adventure, they're gonna like it. If it keeps them at the edge of their seat, if it's whimsical, if there's mystery, if there's something that needs to be solved, they're going to enjoy it. So I would say, even if say your kids are into coin collecting, right? Like, you might not find books that are interesting on coin collecting right away. It's a weird example, but you get the point. But if you find a book that is funny and fast-paced or adventurous and fast-paced, then you're right in the pocket. Tip number 3 is when you're reading, read with emotion. Make sure that you bring the words to life for them. One, to keep their interest, but also to model for them how they're meant to read. So when they're reading the book, even to themselves, they're not just kind of reading in a monotone like way. They're reading with emotion, and they're giving meaning to the words, and they're bringing the story to life. So you're modeling that while you're reading, and you're also making it more exciting. Once you've gotten into the habit of reading to them, then I would move into shared reading, where you take turns reading together. So you would start with a page, reading a page, and then they would read a page, or you would start reading one paragraph and then they'll read the next one, and that's kind of the one step down from you reading everything to them. You would a very fun part of reading is being able to choose what you're going to read next. Like once you find something that you like, or something that made you laugh, or something that made you feel something, or was exciting, you get to go to the bookstore together and you get to choose the next thing. So go on BookTube and watch videos like this one. Look up, books like whichever title you happen to like together. Book recommendations for whatever your child's age is. Look at those videos, watch them together, and then decide which ones you want to read next. You can go to the bookstore. You can ask the people who work at the bookstore for recommendations, which we've done many, many times, and they'll walk us through and show us books we've never heard of. So make that an event. Make it like, this Friday we get to go and choose our book, or Thursday we get to choose our new book, whatever day it is. Once you choose the book, after having read to them for a bit, you would do the shared reading. So you would sit together and you would take turns, and then you would talk about the book, and you do it with some snacks, or you do it with, a beverage, and you make it cozy and make it nice. And then after that, the child will start to read on their own. It'll become a habit to finish a book and then go get another one. Go to the library, talk to the librarian, find something that you're excited about, and then you start telling each other about what you're reading. And then, like, my kids will sit next to each other. Sometimes my kids will sit right here next to me, and I'll read my book and they'll read theirs, and then we'll talk to each other about what we read. And we'll do it for, 30 minutes to an hour. And then we'll talk about what we read together, and it's opening the conversation. A lot of these books have really great themes, answers to big life questions, situations that they maybe haven't heard of before that they want to know more about. And it gives you the opportunity to talk to them. It gives you the opportunity to get to know how they're thinking, how they're perceiving things, what questions they have. And you can then build a stronger relationship with them and have more to talk about. Okay, so now into the books that I recommend. The first one I read with my oldest daughter when she was about 10 years old. This is Flora and Ulysses by Kate DiCamillo. I know it's backwards, I'm sorry. I'm using the front-facing camera. It starts with the graphic novel portion. The illustrations are amazing. And this book is so funny. So Flora is a little girl. She's an only child. She lives with her mom. And Ulysses is the squirrel. That's Ulysses. And so in the beginning, in the part that I just showed you, Flora's mom gets a vacuum delivery. And the vacuum is very powerful, and it goes outside to the backyard, and it vacuums up a squirrel. And the squirrel gets superpowers. It's an amazing book because it's so funny, but it's dry humor. So Flora is very cynical, and she just doesn't have a good outlook on the world, but she's like unintentionally hilarious. Okay, so let me read you the first page. Chapter 1, A Natural Born Cynic. Just said that. Flora Bell Buckman was in her room at her desk. She was very busy. She was doing two things at once. She was ignoring her mother, and she was also reading a comic book entitled The Illuminated Adventures of the Amazing Incandesto. Flora, her mother shouted, what are you doing up there? I'm reading, Flora shouted back. Remember the contract, her mother shouted. Do not forget the contract. At the beginning of summer, in a moment of weakness, Flora had made the mistake of signing a contract that said she would, quote, work to turn her face away from the idiotic hijinks of comics and toward the bright light of true literature. Those were the exact words of the contract. They were her mother's words. Flora's mother was a writer. She was divorced, and she wrote romance novels. Talk about idiotic hijinks. Flora hated romance novels. In fact, she hated romance. I hate romance, said Flora out loud to herself. She liked the way the words sounded. She imagined them floating above her in a comic strip bubble. It was a comforting thing to have words hanging over her head, especially negative words about romance. There she is, saying, I hate romance. It's adorable. It's so funny. It's adventurous. They get into all kind of hijinks. And it's a different kind of funny than you'll find in other children's books. This one is more quaint. This is Wish Tree by Catherine Applegate. This one is more calm and sweet. It has a message about protecting the environment, but it's written from the point of view of a tree. And you meet all of the animals in the tree. You understand the tree's feelings and how the tree feels about people, and it's just so yummy. Like, this one is not like super fast or anything like that, but it's just very, very childlike, very easy, but and it tackles some important topics, but in a very, very sweet way, almost like Mr. Rogers would make this up, right? So let's see. Here's the first page. It's hard to talk to trees. We're not big on chit chat. That's not to say we can't do amazing things. Things you'll probably never do. Cradle downy owlets, steady flimsy tree forts, photosynthesize. But talk to people? Not so much. And just try to get a tree to tell a good joke. Trees do talk to some folks, the ones we know we can trust. We talk to daredevil squirrels. We talk to hard-working worms. We talk to flashy butterflies and bashful moths. Birds? They're delightful. Frogs? Grumpy but good-hearted. Snakes? Terrible gossips. Trees? Never met a tree I didn't like. Well, okay, there's that one sycamore down at the corner. Yickety, yickety, yak, that one. So do we ever talk to people? Actually talk? That most people-y of people skills? Good question. Trees have a rather complicated relationship with people after all. One minute you're hugging us, the next minute you're turning us into tables and tongue depressors. So cute. Very cute, very memorable. I read that one a really long time ago too, but I love it, love it, love it. This one is called The Train to Impossible Places. I read this to a class of middle grade children, and they were at the edge of their seat the whole time. They never wanted to put it down. Sometimes I would go way over time because they were so into it, and I live for that. So I would be like, okay, you want to keep going? Let's keep going. There are 3 books in this. I think this is a trilogy. I'm pretty sure it's 3. Yeah. So it's about a girl named Susie. Here's Susie here. So, and these are all those the characters on the back. All the main characters, really. Susie is home with her parents. She's really into physics, and she accidentally happens to see a troll come into her house and build a train. It's in the first chapter, so I'm not giving anything away. He builds a train that kind of goes through wormholes, and her house was one of the stations, and nobody knew that. Obviously, it was like an underground different world. But it was on a night where her parents were sleeping, and the troll that was in charge of putting everyone in the house to sleep missed her, and she caught the troll building the train, and she snuck onto the train, and she's on the train with them, and she realizes that the places that this train is going to have a lot of danger. The train is a delivery train of sorts, so they're a postal express kind of, and they deliver things to people in all the world building here is outrageous. Like, there's so many worlds that are impossible, but they're amazing. She goes underwater. She's in a desert. She meets this really evil woman. At the end of each chapter, you're like, no. I need to know what else. I need to know what else happened. Okay, so this is the first page. Lightning in the living room. It started with a flash, a green flash, as bright and quick as lightning. There and then gone again. It happened so quickly that Susie wasn't sure she had seen anything at all, although she raised her head from her homework and looked around. "What was that?" she asked. "What was what, darling?" said her mother from the sofa where she and Susie's father were both sprawled in a heap, still in their work clothes. Susie frowned. "Did you see it, Dad?" Her father was hunched over his table, reading the news and muttering to himself about the state of the government. "See what, sweetheart?" "That green flash. Didn't either of you see it?" Said her mother, shaking her braids loose, while trying to stifle an enormous yawn. Her father looked around the room in bleary-eyed confusion. "I didn't notice anything." It's the train, and it's so good. Okay, last but not least, an absolute classic. If you don't read this out loud, there's something wrong with you. If you've not read it yet, I don't know where you've been or what you've been doing with your time. You need to pick this up. I don't care what the hype about the book has made you feel. I don't care if you're like, oh, that's for nerds. You're wrong. You're wrong. That's it. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. If you are reading to a middle grade child, it's good to start here. My social studies teacher read this to us as a read aloud just to kind of cool our brains down. And I have been legitimately hooked for the rest of my life. But when I did my undergrad in English, one of the classes we had to take was children's literature. And somebody in the class was like, I renounced that book before ever reading it because it just got so much hype and it just seemed like such a weird fandom. And I didn't want to really dive into that. And it was assigned to us in class, so she had to read it. And she goes, "I cannot believe what I was missing by not reading. This is just so well written." If you watch the first movie, like when I was a child, I devoured this. And then my parents took me to see the movie in theaters when it came out. And my siblings and my parents were like, "This is what you're into." And I'm like, "You don't get it. You have to read it. You have to." J.K. Rowling's ability to create a world and to create characters that are they just really live. These are real characters. This is as real as it gets in literature. It's out of this world. You have to, if you haven't. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, but if you have not read Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, especially as a read aloud to your children, do it today. Go get it. Okay, here's the first page. The Boy Who Lived. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal, thank you very much. They were the last people you'd expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious, because they just didn't hold with such nonsense. Mr. Dursley was a director of a firm called Grunnings, which made drills. He was a big, beefy man with hardly any neck, although he did have a very large mustache. Mrs. Dursley was thin and blonde and had nearly twice the usual amount of neck, which came in very useful as she spent so much of her time craning over garden fences spying on the neighbors. The Dursleys had a small son called Dudley, and in their opinion there was no finer boy anywhere. The Dursleys had everything they wanted, but they also had a secret, and their greatest fear was that somebody would discover it. This is everything. Okay, so those are my read aloud book recommendations. I want you guys to know that Middle Grade March is coming up next month, and I have a wild amount of books to share with you. So I'm going to be doing this more often, giving book recommendations. Please let me know if there are any other books that you recommend as read alouds. And if you try anything that I am telling you about today, please also tell me how that went. I think that everyone is a reader. I think that if someone says that they're not, it's because they just haven't found the right book yet. And I live for the moment where people realize how amazing it can be to just lose yourself in a book. There's so much more to it though. It teaches you about yourself. It teaches you about the world around you. It builds empathy. It builds understanding. It helps with your brain. If you read before sleep, it helps you sleep better. It builds your vocabulary. You become a better writer. You have more of an imagination. You have an escape. It helps you relax. It's meditative. There is an infinite amount of positive benefits to reading. So, yeah, let me know how it goes. Thank you for watching this. Please subscribe. I never ask anyone to subscribe, but if you've seen more than one of my videos and you're still here, please consider subscribing, like the video, share it, and stay tuned. I'm going to be sharing more about my school that's opening in September, and more tips that might help you with your children. Okay, bye.